A high school football star who took his own life after falling victim to a sextortion scam is finally seeing justice. Nigerian brothers Samuel and Samson Ogoshi posed as a woman on Instagram and tricked 17-year-old Jordan Deay into sending them intimate photos. They demanded the teen send them $1,000, threatening to share the pictures with his friends and family if he didn't pay up. 6 hours later, Deay was found dead. His last message was, "I'm killing myself right now because of you." Now the scammers have pleaded guilty to conspiring to exploit teenage boys.
When I tell you this brought tears to my eyes as a mom, this brought tears to my eyes, okay? This is Matthew and Savannah baby Fabian. If most of y'all know the Savannah Soto case, 18-year-old pregnant girl from Texas. Unfortunately, she was found deceased. Her and her boyfriend were found deceased, and she was pregnant with baby Fabian. She was going to be having him any day, y'all. This is baby Fabian. This picture was shared by the family, and they wanted to show how peaceful he looked, and he looks. And the message says, "We will forever be grateful to at now I lay me down to sleep for these wonderful photos of our grandson Fabian Guerrera. Memories we can hold in our heart till we get to hold you again. You are now an angel with mommy and daddy in heaven. So the day we see Matthew, Savannah, and baby Fabian again, you will all be forever in our hearts. I know all three are looking down on us as a family in heaven." And these are some photos from the funeral, you guys. She was buried holding her baby. It's hard to hold back tears right now, but rest in peace to Savannah, Matthew, and baby Fabian.
This is one of the scariest ghost stories I've heard, so now everyone's got to hear it. Back in 2003, there was this group of deployed American Marines who got moved into abandoned military housing that was dubbed Ghost Town. It got the name because apparently the first group of Marines that lived there only made it a week before they couldn't live there anymore. They said they couldn't sleep the entire time they were there. Like all night they would hear the sounds of children laughing, of like footsteps upstairs when there was no one there. I talk about it this week on the podcast, but one night the new group that had moved in had to go out and patrol the area. So they're walking through the neighborhood, like past a bunch of abandoned houses, and then all of a sudden, one of the Marines just starts screaming. He throws his weapon down and just takes off running, like through enemy territory with no weapon. So half of the Marines chase after him, and then the other half turn around to see what he was screaming at. They said that behind them, there was this creature that looked like a shadow come to life. It was really tall and skinny, but they said it had these bright, glowing red eyes. But before they knew what to do, it just vanished. The craziest part is that multiple other people have reported seeing this exact creature like in the area. If you want to hear more of these stories, you gotta check out the podcast this week.
This math teacher had with 2 schoolboys, and one of them got her pregnant. The boy told police in an interview that Jonas had given her 10 of the 11 digits to her phone number and challenged him to guess the other, which he had, and that had led to them messaging each other. Joins groomed the first student by taking him to the Trafford Centre and bought him a Gucci belt. Later, she drove the boy back to her flat in Salford, where they had sex twice. Rumours spread among the boy's friends, the jury heard, and Joyce was suspended by her school in October 2021 after being arrested by police. She was subsequently charged and was due to face trial, but then it emerged she had been in a long-term intimate relationship with second student. She said the relationship had begun when the boy was 15, and he went to her flat twice, where they kissed. But it became intimate when he turned 16, whilst she was on bail and faced charges over the first student. Phone messages between then became more flirtatious. One he sent read, "Get your tits out," and she replied, "Not tonight." And then she went on to send him a photo of her bum in just her knickers. Sacked in July 2022, denies 4 charges of inappropriate activity with a child and 2 charges of inappropriate activity with a child as a person in a position of trust. The trial continues and is expected to last 2 weeks.
Interesting facts you never knew. The last one will shock. If you stay up all night, your body burns an extra 161 calories. If you pinch the skin on your elbow as hard as you can, you won't feel any pain. One of your friends wants to be more than a friend to you. It's the third person you see when you click on share and then more. A woman can get pregnant while she's already pregnant and have children by 2 different people at the same time. If you Google the word askew, the page will tilt slightly clockwise. Go do it and then come back and let me know if it worked in the comments below. There's a syndrome where people believe they're turning into trees called Cotard's syndrome. Almost 20 million people share the same birthday. Comment your birthday and see who has the same one as you. My birthday is August 29th. Before the last fact, support me by clicking the follow button for more interesting facts every day. A British Marine had a leg tattoo of Liverpool's motto, "You'll never walk alone." He got hurt in Afghanistan and had to get his leg amputated, which also cut off part of the tattoo. Now it says, "You'll never walk."
What was Megan Thee Stallion talking about when she referenced Megan's Law? If this law existed, 7-year-old Megan Conca wouldn't have been SA'd and killed. Jesse Timandakas had served time for 2 previous convictions for SA against children, but still he was able to move across the street from 7-year-old Megan Conca and her family. Her parents had no idea that the man who seemed to be chilling in his yard every time Megan went out to play or draw with sidewalk chalk was watching her, and waiting for the time to strike. On July 29, 1994, he lured the child into his house under the pretense that she could play with his new puppy. He SA'd her, but because he didn't want her to report it, he strangled her with a belt, and he dumped her body in the nearby park. And the next day, he confessed to police and led them to the dump site. Evidence included bloodstains, hair samples, and a bite mark on Jesse's hand because Megan had tried to fight back. He was initially given the death penalty, but the state of New Jersey changed this to life in prison without parole. And because Megan's family had no idea that they were living across the street from someone who had committed violent crimes against children, they fought to have a federal law passed in Megan's name. Megan's Law requires law enforcement to make info on offenders public. By being a registered offender, you're added to the offender registry that includes your name, crimes, and address, and you must alert the government if you move. Before Megan's Law, only 5 states required people like this to register, as required in the Jacob Wetterling Act, which I covered in a separate video. Together, the Wetterling Act and Megan's Law protect the public in 2 ways. 1, the registry itself, and 2, community notification for the public. Megan's Law would have given Megan's family the chance to protect her. And looking up the list of offenders in your area is something I recommend for everybody to do, and let me know if you want me to make a tutorial on how to do that. So when Megan Thee Stallion referenced Megan's Law in her newest diss track, she was referencing the fact that Nicki Minaj is married to a offender. If you like this video, give me a follow and stay safe out there.
This kid hated his Spanish teacher so much, he offered his friends £10 to murder her. Will Cornick's parents separated, but both were described as supportive. He enrolled at Corpus Christi in Year 7. His former head of year said he was polite and always showed up. Prior to the murder, he only had 4 instances of misbehaviour in 4.5 years at the school and had no criminal record. His classmates described him as academically gifted and unlikely to cause trouble. Will's personality changed after he collapsed while on holiday in Cornwall, and he was diagnosed with diabetes. Sadly, he self-harmed due to the condition. In 2013, he was disappointed to learn that he wouldn't be able to join the army due to his diabetes. At Christmas that year, he sent a Facebook message to his friend where he talked about brutally murdering Anne Maguire, who was his Spanish teacher. Will had been planning the murder 4 days beforehand. It was said that he held a deep-seated grudge against Anne Maguire. He had also sent Facebook messages to his friends, asking them if they could murder her for £10. On the 28th of April 2014, Will attended class as normal. After morning break, he went to the top floor for his Spanish lessons. Midway through the lessons, he got up and started randomly attacking Anne, stabbing her 7 times in the back and neck with a 21cm knife. One cut straight through her jugular vein. He then chased her into the corridor, where Susan Francis was, who was the head of Spanish. She started to scream for help. She managed to separate and shield Anne from Will. Susan managed to put Anne in a room by herself, and held the door closed to keep Will away from her. She was also pregnant at the time. Will then returned to class, and told a friend that it was a shame that he had not killed Anne there and there. Will had bought a bottle of whiskey to celebrate, and he admitted that he was going to kill 2 more teachers. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 20 years.
Tiptoe through the window, by the window, by the door, they come tiptoe through the tulips with me.
Congratulations, you've once again made it to criminal TikTok, and these chemicals, when combined, will create deadly results. Remember to tag a friend below so they don't accidentally combine these chemicals and use them on someone that they don't like. Alright, the first one, I'm sure everyone knows this, but if you mix these two common household ingredients, bleach and ammonia, for example, while cleaning a toilet, you know what this does? Creates mustard gas. But if you didn't already know this, if you combine bleach with someone's dog's piss, that shit might make chlorine gas. Obviously not a lot, but if the dog pisses a lot, or it's in an enclosed space, this will fucking cause some serious shit. Next up, if you accidentally mix hydrogen peroxide and then mix that with vinegar at the right concentrations, that creates something called peracetic acid. I don't even know what the fuck that is, but it sounds dangerous. Remember not to accidentally throw that on someone you don't like. And last but not least, there's a reason why you never mix bleach with rubbing alcohol, okay? The reason is it creates chloroform, the shit that knocks you out and fucking kills you after a while. Remember, do not use any of these and stay safe.
Have you ever heard of Leonardo Cianciulli? Or the soap maker of Correggio? Sorry if I butchered that. At the turn of the 20th century, Leonardo had 17 pregnancies in total. Out of those 17 pregnancies, she lost 3 children to miscarriage and 10 died very young. Leonardo was very protective of her 4 remaining children, especially her oldest son, who was her favorite, Giuseppe. Again, I'm sorry if I butchered that. Giuseppe decided to enlist in the Italian army to help with World War II efforts. Leonardo was deeply suspicious, and when her son joined the army, she turned to those superstitions to keep him safe. Leonardo would go on to murder 3 women from 1939 to 1940. She would lure them in under the guise of work or matchmaking in a different country. She had the women write detailed letters to her families explaining their trips. She would then kill them with an axe and bake them into tea cakes that she would feed to her son and her friends and family. With her last victim, she even went as far as to turn her into soap. But her last victim had family that didn't believe the story of the quick trip to a different country. They would involve the police, and one of her family members had seen her go into Leonardo's home. It didn't take long for Leonardo to confess to everything. Leonardo's trial would only last for 3 days, and she was sentenced to 33 years in prison. She died of a brain hemorrhage in prison on October 15th of 1970. She was 79 years old. I personally don't think that was enough time, but what do you think?
This girl killed her mum and then texted a photo of her body to her dad. In 2013, Rachel Hudson and her family were supposed to be celebrating Thanksgiving at their home in Virginia. However, the holiday would take a horrendously sinister turn. Rachel's mum was terminally ill 58-year-old Susan Lee. Rachel had been her mum's carer since she was just 9 years old. On the evening in question, Rachel and her dad got into an argument. When her dad left the house the next day to make the most of the Black Friday sales, Rachel did something unthinkable. She took a weapon out of the wardrobe and loaded it. She apparently thought about unaliving herself at this point, but she didn't want to put her mum through the trauma of finding her body. She then walked into the room where her mum was and said, "I'm sorry, this is what has to happen." Her mum apparently told her, "You're crazy," and this is the point where Rachel killed her mum. When she texted her dad to break the news to him, he obviously didn't believe what she was saying. She then took a photo of her mum's body and texted it over to her dad. Rachel was sentenced initially to 50 years in prison, but this was reduced to 18 years because of an apparent undiagnosed mental illness.
In an interview with People magazine, Gypsy Rose and her husband Ryan Anderson are sharing their love story. The couple got married in a prison ceremony in July 2022, but up until this point, we hadn't really known the details of how they met. But shortly before she was released, both Gypsy and Ryan spoke with People magazine and shared some more details of their love story. Ryan Anderson is a 37-year-old special education teacher originally from Gypsy's home state of Louisiana. He told People that they first met back in 2020 when he decided to take a chance and write to her. He said, "It was when Tiger King was really popular. My coworker at the time said, 'I want to write to Tiger King.' And I said, 'I'll tell you what, if you write to him, I'll write to Gypsy Rose Blanchard.'" In that first letter, Ryan told Gypsy, quote, "what her story meant to me, and on the second page, I just let her have it. I told her everything about me." He didn't expect to hear back, but by May 2020, the two were corresponding regularly. Ryan said that he would get butterflies when he got an email from Gypsy. And when the two spoke on the phone for the first time and he heard her voice, that all but sealed the deal for him. Gypsy was also falling in love as Ryan, quote, "became her emotional backbone." She said that they met when the pandemic was really strong and she had a lot of emotional ups and downs because of it. She said, "Ryan has seen me through some really good times, some really hard times. I would say that he is probably the most compassionate soul that I've ever met and the most patient." She said, "I could be a lot to handle. I could be an emotional handful, but he is so patient with her." Because of restrictions thanks to the pandemic, they didn't meet in person until July 2021. But they continued to get closer, and according to the interview with People, Ryan became so in tune with Gypsy's emotions that he could tell how she was feeling as soon as she picked up the phone. Gypsy said, "We've been able to build this emotional bond that within 2 seconds of talking on the phone, he knows my emotions." She said, "I'm thankful that I have a man that is open enough with his own emotions so I could let my emotions flow." On July 21st, 2022, Gypsy and Ryan got married in a prison ceremony. And today, December 28th, 2023, he was the one to pick her up when she was released. Gypsy also mentioned in the interview with People that she wants kids one day. She said, "It's hard because I'm going into a new life and I'm newly married and I'm going to have kids one day and I'm going to have to explain to my kids why their grandmother on mommy's side isn't around. And that's going to be a really hard conversation." But by all accounts, it seems like Gypsy is really happy with Ryan and that he has been there supporting her through a lot. So hopefully he will be continuing to support her as she adjusts to her new life.
Did you guys hear about the couple that tortured and killed their au pair? Sophie Lynette was a 20-year-old French woman who wanted to work as an au pair in England so that she could learn English. A lot of people take on au pair positions for this reason. It's when you live with a family and take care of their kids while also learning their customs and language. She got a position working for Sabrina Quater and Wissam Madouni. They were French nationals that lived near London, and everything seemed to be going great at first. But little did Sophie know, Sabrina had a very delusional and violent side of her. Sabrina ruled her household with an iron fist and hardly paid Sophie. Sim was very submissive to his wife, which is typically fine, but Sabrina began to abuse Sophie. Neighbors noticed that Sophie seemed stressed and sad, and she had also lost a lot of weight. This is a photo taken just days before she died. Sabrina had withheld food and taken away Sophie's ID and cell phone so that she couldn't contact her family. Sabrina got it into her head that her au pair was in cahoots with her ex-boyfriend Mark Walton. Sabrina was convinced that Sophie would get up in the middle of the night and let Mark into their house so that he could abuse their children. And her husband eventually started to believe her. And to be clear, Mark Walton didn't even live in England at the time, and he had no idea who Sophie was. Over a period of several months, the couple beat Sophie, whipped her with extension cords, and then waterboarded her in their bathtub. On Sabrina's phone, they found that she actually recorded some of these interrogations, although the actual audio is not public. It wasn't until neighbors noticed black smoke and a foul odor coming from the couple's backyard. Firefighters showed up and they noticed that chicken was on the grill, but there was also a large fire next to the grill. Upon further inspection, they noticed a pair of glasses as well as human fingers and a nose. Sabrina and Sim had killed Sophie, but there was no way to tell for sure exactly how she died. The autopsy showed that she had been beaten severely, and she had several cracked ribs and even a cracked sternum, which I guess means that they stepped on her chest. Because of her inflated lungs, they think that her cause of death was drowning. Both of them were sentenced to 30 years to life behind bars.
No, because while all this stuff that's been going on in the world is reminding me of American Horror Story Apocalypse Season, let's talk about it. Now, I talk a lot about this show because I feel like it is really woke and it is completely accurate with a lot of stuff that they talk about. So if you haven't watched the show or this episode, I'm about to give y'all a whole rundown of why I feel like it's reminding me of what's going on right now in the world. So this whole series was basically talking about the end times, the apocalypse, the end of the world, whatever you want to call it. And the world didn't end in a natural way. The world ended on the show because of the higher ups and the Antichrist. Yeah. So the dude that is like the spawn of Satan, so the son of Satan is the Antichrist. He, ever since he was a kid, he's just been super evil. Like, I'm talking about anybody that worked for them at their house, he would kill. As a little kid, he would kill all type of little animals. I'm talking about birds, all type of stuff. It was just really bad. He even had like the mark of the beast or something on the back of his ear. It was crazy. So the lady that raised him was just so tired of burying all the nannies and maids and all this in the backyard. So she kicked him to the curb. So at this point, he's like a teenager. He's lost. He's the Antichrist. But he knows it, but he doesn't quite know like his powers yet. So he stumbles across this Church of Satan, where he meets one of the members that was actually really nice to him. And she finds out that he is the spawn of Satan. Now, everybody in this church, or whatever you want to call it, was waiting on this day. Like, that's all they've been waiting on was the Antichrist, of course, for obvious reasons. Their goal was to end the world and restart it over in the devil's image. So the lady that was basically helping the boy out, because at this point he was homeless and he just stumbled across the church and he met her there, she let him stay at her house. He was feeding him and everything like this. And he lost the only person that ever loved him, which was this lady that basically taught him everything he knew about like Satan and all that. So she was like, we can find her, we can get her back. We got powers, we got connections to everywhere, all over the world. And he was like, you can't do that because she's gone. And he was like, yes, we can. So she take him to the multi-billion-dollar tech company ran by these two boys that you would probably think like would be in their mom's basement playing the video games. And they were the cooperative. Y'all already know the other word for it, but I'm not going to say it on here because, you know, TikTok. They said how they sold their soul, and that's how they got the biggest tech company in the world. And those two boys that ran that tech company helped the Antichrist in the world. So the only people that were saved were the people that was in the cooperative and the super rich people that could afford underground bunkers. Haven't a lot of these rich people been talking about how they have bunkers and all these underground shelters? Yeah, all right. But I said all that to say the world was ended by the higher ups. And the only people that survived were the people that can afford it and people with a specific blood type. I'm not going to say his name, but y'all already know who this story reminds me of. His initials is EM, and he's super rich. But let me know what y'all think in the comments.
This is one of the worst cases in human history. This is the murder of Christine Siluan. She was from the Philippines and was a volunteer in church, and she used the church every day from 4 to 6 p.m. On the day of her murder, she went to church as per her schedule, but she didn't come home after that. Her parents then started to worry and they began searching for her with their neighbors. And what they found is absolutely horrid. They found her body in a farm where half her face was sliced like a piece of pizza, and her face was literally skinned down to her skull. Also, her brain was completely destroyed by acid. The police then started investigating and they checked the cameras and found out that she was with a guy. The people started protesting about this case, and the case was then given to special officers. They had a lot of pressure on this. A week before this happened, she broke up with her boyfriend, so the police took him into custody. And he was proving that he was at home all day when she was murdered, but officers were completely tired of this case, and they then sentenced him as the murderer. But after a few months, a thief was caught in a store where he confessed that he murdered and raped Christine. He said he started talking to her on Facebook with a fake account and was using fake photos of another guy that was pretty good looking. Christine fell for the guy and she assumed that he was about 20 years old, and they started texting daily. One day they both decided to meet up at 6 p.m. near the church she went to. But upon arriving, Christine noticed that this was not the guy she was talking to, and he was around 40-ish years old. She then refused to talk to him and tried to go back, but he held her hands extremely forcefully. He then took her far away from town and raped her repeatedly and put iron rods inside her personal organs. He then cut her face in half and then skinned her whole head down to the skull. And to make it even worse, he put acid inside of her head. The autopsy also revealed that her tongue, trachea, esophagus, parts of her neck, and her right ear were missing. The self-proclaimed killer of this case, named Renato Lanis, said that he used barber-type scissors and stabbed her 30 times on different parts of her body and skinned her face. Christine Silouan was only 16 years old, and this case is extremely haunting. There's a picture of her body that was found in the field, but Google did a really good job of not showing it and hiding it. So even if you do go looking for the picture, I don't think you're going to find it. This is one of those cases that after you get done reading it, you just feel some sort of uneasiness. I feel so bad for Christine's family, and I can't imagine finding my daughter in this state. May Christine Silouan rest in peace.
This pedophile committed a crime so disturbing that a petition was created that asked the government to publicly hang him, and the petition gathered thousands of signatures. This is 33-year-old Benjamin Taylor from West Virginia, and in 2016 he would commit one of the most sickening crimes I've ever read about. Back in 2016, Benjamin was living with his girlfriend, a woman named Amanda Adkins. At the time, Amanda had recently given birth only 9 months ago to her baby daughter, Emily. Emily was a beautiful young girl. And I want to warn you all right now, the details that we're about to discuss are some of the most disturbing I've ever covered. So in October of 2016, Benjamin had only been living with his girlfriend Amanda for about a month. And on the morning of Emily's death at around 4:30 a.m., Amanda woke up and went downstairs to search for her baby. When she went downstairs, she saw Benjamin Taylor with his pants unzipped sitting in the dark. Amanda then noticed that her 9-month-old daughter's limp body was lying nearby on a pile of sheets and laundry. Amanda screamed at Benjamin and grabbed her daughter's lifeless body, but he remained silent and stared at the ground. The details of what had just happened down there are disturbing. Local authorities would call this the worst assault that they had seen in decades. You see, Benjamin and Emily were covered in the infant's blood. After the child's body was examined, the authorities were able to determine that she had been assaulted by an adult male multiple times. The infant child was also bleeding extensively and had suffered head trauma. Emily had a fractured skull and brain hemorrhaging. Authorities believe that Emily may have been shaken violently, or even thrown to the ground or slammed against a hard object. When police arrived at the scene, Benjamin Taylor was observed trying to wipe something off of his groin. That was eventually determined to be Emily's blood. He also told authorities that he remembered taking the baby to the basement, but that he blacked out after that. You see, he had been smoking and drinking the night before, and that was his excuse. Thankfully, Benjamin was convicted of all charges and sentenced to life in prison without mercy, as you can see right here. But for some people, that just wasn't enough. And like I said at the beginning of this video, a petition was created which asked the government to publicly hang Benjamin. And this petition, before it was shut down, gathered over 50,000 signatures. I mean, this truly is one of the worst things that I've ever covered here on my TikTok. And personally, I don't think that life in prison is enough for this guy. I mean, the pain that poor Emily went through before she was eventually killed is just heartbreaking on every single level. And I just hope and pray that the other prisoners that are in there with Benjamin find out or already have found out exactly what he did to land himself in there. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife, Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms.